All the stuff that gets thrown on Western nations and how they have to accept it. Like you have to suppress your culture, your heritage, your religion. What other country does that to host some other people? Who does that? Nobody. Why is it always the West that has to do it?
So when you present people with this argument that there were actually Muslim slave traders, and a lot of them, who took a significant number of white people, what is the response? Why is there like a right-wing or a left-wing policy as opposed to an evidence policy? So for example, data is not right or left, like global climate data is not right. There's just data. Right. What you do with the data in terms of your public policy, that is inherently political.
That's, I think, one of the biggest problems nowadays is we are trapped in this left-right spectrum.
I think that should give us courage. Exposure to other people's perspectives.
Moving us in a good direction.
So there's a lot of controversy with the St. George's flag and Islamic immigration, and I'm hoping that you can give us some historical clarity on this. What's going on?
Yeah, good question, Peter. So the background, the context is that in the UK or England, the St. George flag, which is white with a red cross, right, and which hails back primarily, I think, to Edward I, you know, from the movie Braveheart, Longshanks, the bad guy who tortures all the Scots.
Yeah.
He was one of the last crusaders as well. Anyway, what I understand what's going on now is a lot of Brits are gravitating towards that flag. And as to why, there's various reasons, but mostly it's connected to, I think, the migrant crisis, of course.
Oh, interesting,
yeah.
Okay.
So it's being seen and being portrayed as a sort of right-wing, radical right-wing thing. And yet, to me, it's kind of interesting because when you see the interplay between that flag and history, there's actually a very interesting continuity. So as I alluded earlier, the St. George flag with the red cross on white goes all the way back to the Crusader era. And in fact, it's very much similar to the Templar flag, the flag of the Knights of the Temple. And it was founded right around the same time. They're founded around 1119, and Edward, adopts that flag right around late 1200s. But what's interesting about it is the red indicates martyrdom. Okay, so these are the Christians who are dying for their faith against historically Muslims in the Holy Land during the Crusades, and the white would often symbolize purity. So I'm trying to live a righteous lifestyle, but at the same time, I'm willing to go to war and fight for my faith. And that, of course, there's so much that can be said about that. On the one hand, it typified early pre-modern medieval Christianity. On the other hand, it's so kind of poo-pooed nowadays by especially modern Christians. It's such a horrible thing. And yet, I think we're seeing people gravitate back to it because they find the appeal. And a lot of them probably don't even realize how connected these flags were to the fight with Muslims. And yet here they are again, Muslims in their own lands in the UK, right? And the flag is coming back as part of the national kind of resistance.
So the people who are, it's my understanding that primarily the people who are taking down the flags, government officials, because they say it's unsafe.
Right.
So I'm a little unclear. So the historical context for that is, can you
Sure.
fill me in a little more, please?
Well, what they're basically saying is, it's very natural for any people to want to gravitate to the banners of their forefathers, or the flags, in this case, the St. George flag. And in every other context, no one would complain about it. It makes sense. People, they're patriots. They're good, right? They like their heritage, their culture. In the UK and other Western nations, of course, that's a bad thing to do because those countries no longer have their heritage to maintain because they've been sold out to others, to all these migrants from the Islamic world. So obviously, if you cling to the flag of St. George or anything that is distinctly British or English,
You're a Nazi.
You're an evil person. Yeah, because you're supposed to give that up now and embrace multiculturalism, which of course never works for the native people of Europe.
Do the people, so they want, I don't know who the they is in that sentence, but the elites, the politicians, so somebody wants a more multicultural society, but the people, and please push back or correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just throwing this out.
Sure.
This is not my area of expertise, but the people for whom multiculturalism, like they've accepted, they don't accept multiculturalism. Like they don't want multiculturalism.
You mean the people who come in?
Yeah.
Of course not, because multiculturalism is a one-way street. It's only meant to accommodate and help the outsiders and weaken the insiders.
So what percentage of people, is it possible to know a number? Because there are many people, many Muslims, and please push back or correct me if I'm wrong, who really do live in harmony with the host population. They're not blowing shit up. They're not
I agree.
demanding parallel
Yeah.
courts. They're not chopping anybody, sawing anybody's head off with a rusty butter knife. They're like, so what percentage of people are we talking about?
Well, that's the question, right? And that's the difficult question. And it depends on who you ask. But whatever the percent, even let's give it a very conservative number, a very small number.
Okay.
The smallest number I've ever heard, even from apologists, who will say, no, most Muslims will say 10%, right? But that's still a problem, right? If you've got many millions of Muslim migrants in Europe and only 10% are going to blow themselves up or slaughter you or rape your children, that's still a big problem, isn't it? So I agree that a lot of them are not necessarily doing this. A lot of them are in it for a good life. A lot of them just are doing whatever they can, but...
Okay, so I know you're not the kind of guy I have to risk offending, but I'm going to say it anyway. Why should anybody in the U.S. care?
About Europe, you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand why the people over there should care. I guess to an extent I do. To an extent, I really don't care because they don't care about themselves. So why?
Right.
But why should we care about what happens if they be like? Why should who? I mean, in the United States, we're sick of it. We have debts. We have homeless problems, fentanyl problems. We have. Why should we care?
Well, I don't think your average American cares about it. I don't think
I
they even
agree.
care about.
I don't even think
they don't
can
care about
find
the
it on a map.
Yeah. I don't think they care at all. I think the only lesson or the instruction in what's happening to the UK is it's sort of a window into what America could look like in the future. Because let's just put it this way: Western Europe is much more progressive, so they tend to reach certain progressive benchmarks before the U.S. does. And here's where it's at. So if you look at countries like Sweden, the UK, other Scandinavian nations, but Sweden is obviously the worst, Germany, all of them really, Austria, Italy, Spain, because I follow this very closely. Again, it's not necessarily all of the migrants. That would be a complete, bedlam.
Oh my gosh,
but
yeah.
it's a small percentage, but it's still havoc what they're doing.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding, for example, we take a different kind of migrant. So Pakistani migrants in this country are far more successful than Pakistani migrants in Western Europe. So it's the type of migrants that Western Europe is taking in. Is that?
Well, you know what I think it is also a large part of it is it's the numbers. So in the U.S., there's smaller numbers that come in of migrants, of Muslims. And so with the smaller the number is, the larger the chance it'll actually assimilate in the melting pot. But what happens in Europe is they go there immediately and they get into a ghetto. They're all Pakistanis or they're all whatever, Syrians. They're all from Morocco. And they just live their way. So they never change. And they're almost like a parasite in the host culture that never assimilates. But I think in America, it's a little different because the numbers are, take me, for example, my family's from Egypt. When I was born here, I didn't know any Egyptians. It was very rare, I'm Coptic. So in the Coptic church, we'd go and I know a few, but we moved around a lot. And it was very often I'd go years. I didn't even know any, I wouldn't meet them. Now, there's places here in New Jersey, for example, I was there the other day and it's like they have a little Egypt and it's all Egyptians and Egyptians. So when you have that, it becomes very difficult for people to assimilate because they stay within their tribe and they never change.
Okay, so what is the problem with a large number of, for example, Egyptian Muslims or Somali Muslims? Maybe that's, I realize that's quite different after I said it, but what is the problem with a large number of these individuals living in a host country not assimilating?
Well, the fundamental problem is we have to go again to what does Islam teach? Islam is inherently tribalistic. So the first thing you have to understand that to the Muslim, he grows up, it's all about being loyal to my thing, which is fellow Muslims, right? And there's subcategories, my family and etc. But the non-Muslim is de facto enemy, has always been. Do you know that during the Middle Ages, if you were going to travel to the Caliphate from Europe, because you're going to have an embassy with the Caliph or the Sultan, you're being sent by an emperor, you had to have a special permit to say you're not to get killed. Because if you were just a regular European entering Muslim lands, that means you're dead. You're enslaved or killed on sight. Okay, so that was the mentality. If few people understand that, and it still carries over till today. Whether if you're a radical, then of course it does because it's an actual doctrine. that you have to hate and war and try to subvert the infidel. But even if you're not a radical, it carries in as part of this sort of tribalistic worldview that many Muslims have. It's us against them. And tribalism, of course, transcends religion, but it's really very much, we even had that one discussion before, but it's very much part of the religion of Islam. Because what Muhammad did is he basically deified tribalism. He took the concept of us against them, but he turned it into a religious thing, no longer a blood ethnic thing. Okay, and that's just how it's been throughout history. So when you bring large groups of Egyptians or Somalis who are Muslim and they don't assimilate, and inherently they have this us against them.
Yeah.
Well, obviously that's not a good thing. And your average American or European is more, grows up in this sort of civic society idea, and we're all trying to help each other. And I give you the benefit of the doubt, so you can easily see who's going to be preyed upon and exploited very easily. And that's kind of what we're seeing.
Does it make a difference which country the Muslim immigrants come from? Like if they're from Indonesia, if they're from Dubai, that's a city, but if they're from, does it make a difference?
Sure, I think there's enough room for nuance, for cultural differences and ethnic differences, even if they're all Muslim. Because I see that in my own studies when I look at various countries. Okay, but still, it's still interesting to note that, I'll give you an example. So Indonesia is always seen as a very moderate Muslim nation, right?
Correct.
And then another country like Wahhabi Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan will be seen as very radical. Now, every month I follow the persecution of Christians in Islamic lands. And they always follow patterns.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah, it is. It's a full-time job, but the persecution manifests itself in various patterns, which of course go back to Islamic teaching. So attacks on churches because churches should not be built, for example. And what I find, ironically, is it's across the board. So
what do you mean across the board?
In other words, the persecution will happen also in Indonesia, and it'll happen in Saudi Arabia, and it'll happen in Nigeria. So what I'm saying is that if you look at the multitude of Muslim nations, you got black Muslims, you got white Muslims, Central Asian, Turkish, which look rather white, Syrians, Lebanese. You have East Asian, Sinic, Indonesian, etc., Arabs, of course. And they all have their own different cultures and their own languages and their own socio-economic political systems, right? And yet, when I focus in on this question of what happens to Christians, they all do the same exact thing.
Is there any Muslim country in which Christians are not persecuted?
I guess
it depends what you mean by persecuted.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, okay, so let's not even leave it up to me. There's an organization known as Open Doors. It's a human rights organization. It's been around for decades. And every year they publish an annual report called the World Watch List. Okay. And it lists 50 nations where Christians are being persecuted. Okay. And I look at this every year. I analyze it and I write about it. And those 50 nations, habitually, 37 is the numbers in my head, will be Muslim nations. Okay. So there's 200 at least nations in the world? And this is looking at the 50 worst. And 37 are Muslim nations. Now, I don't know if that's every single Muslim nation or not, but I mean, that's the vast majority of
Are atheists persecuted there as well? Or they're just no open atheists? So
yeah.
They just deny that
atheism doesn't stand out the way Christianity would. Atheists don't go to a temple to celebrate atheism. Right? So
bad atheist.
It's hard to tell who's the atheist,
Okay, so, and the idea is, okay, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the thinking was when there's some kind of turmoil in Syria or what have you, and when we import people, they're going to assimilate and adopt the values of the host country, and we'll be in Shangri-La. Everything's going to be fine. Is that the thinking? It's like...
Yeah, that's the thinking they've sold to people, and people have bought and believed until they've seen the opposite.
Let me pause you right now and say, I would love to have someone on the show who disagrees with you. Mm-hmm. Can you, and I'm going to give, whoever you say, I'm giving an open invitation to. Can you think of anyone who disagrees with you?
Well, it depends on what you mean, because I write primarily about history. If you're talking about history...
someone who can make it popular and understandable to people.
Well, there's this one guy, and I think his name is Roy Cassandra.
You have an open invitation. I've never heard of the guy, but you have an open invitation to come on the show.
People always ask me, he does history, I believe, and people always send me his stuff, and they're like, what is he talking about?
Okay, He has an open invitation to come on the show to have a conversation. Well, let's see if he comes on. Okay, so the situation in UK, you know, when we write about this, or I hear Matt Goodwin or Kaufman or someone write about this, the retort is, well, Muslims are only 6% of the population. What you already, you what?
No, I mean,
Is
I understand they're saying, oh, they're only 6%. Well, I mean, that's already a lot, you know.
Yeah.
What other country has a minority that's 6% that's causing problems, and the response is, well, they're only 6%. Let's get 10 and then see how it is. I mean, yeah, if it's only, and I think it's more than 6%, but if it's only 6% and you got the native Brits are losing their mind, then what the solution is to say it's only 6. Let's get more and see how that happens. Maybe it'll be better. I'm just laughing at their twisted logic.
So, okay, there's so much here. So historically, you're saying, what are you saying? Like, what is the historical lens?
Okay, yeah. So the historical thing is this. We can even look at the UK, all right? The UK, okay, the Crusades. What were the Crusades? The Crusades were a response to Muslims attacking and killing fellow Christians in the East, in the Holy Land, and desecrating holy sites, right? All the holy churches and sepulcher, etc., which for early Christians was a big deal, right? Holy places. So that's what it was about, right? And it went on century after century, and the amount of blood and treasure that the Europeans and Christians spent is astronomical. I mean, this is what I do in my books. This is what I talk about all the time, and most people are just bewildered. The people tell me, I got a degree in history. I never heard of any of this stuff. Well, yeah, there's a reason.
And the reason is what? Ideological capture?
Yeah, the reason is they don't want you, because West Europeans and Americans are being primed to give in to their historic enemy. So we're not going to tell you that they're your historic enemy.
Who's priming them?
Well, that's the question, right? Is it
Oh my God, if I ever mentioned that in one of my classes, I would be hauled before the diversity board. I mean,
Who's priming them?
could not, no, like if I ever mentioned, like, I mean, it's not in my area, but anything that was even...
You mean what I was saying?
Yeah. I mean, if I
but it's true.
ever did that,
history.
It would be...
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if it's true.
But okay, and that's the
truth-seeking
problem right
institutions.
there. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because when people find out the truth, okay, so going back to, Crusades and holy wars, the enemy was the Muslim, right? And the Muslim hated, the Christian. You can't say European, because they just saw each other through religious lens at that point. Okay, so all of that has been expunged, and people have been taught in Europe that, you know what, Muslims were great, you were evil, Crusades are horrible.
It's a reverse crusade.
It's a reverse crusade.
Yeah.
Now it's incumbent on you to make up for what your ancestors did by taking them in. I often hear, like, because of the British colonial era and expansion, and the idea is, because of the horrors we did, now we're letting them come in. It's payback, and it's a lot of perverse kind of thinking. It's like guilt tripping. It's kind of guilt tripping, and it's kind of reached the point where I think people are just like, it's not working.
So we have 6% of the population. Just going with the UK statistic. I think that's right. I don't really know, but roughly 6%.
I mean, those people are losing their mind in the UK. You see that little girl running around with a hatchet and a sword. And...
I have no idea what that was in response to.
Well, but it's whatever it is. It's in response to. It's extreme, and in other words, I don't think it would have happened 10 years ago. So whatever it is, it just shows you that they're reaching ahead at that point. And whoever's at fault, I'm not even saying.
Oh, you mean the very fact that they think it's an illegal immigrant or an immigrant?
Yeah, I guess the context is, I don't even know the context, but I think the fact that they're not telling us the context is itself curious.
Okay, so let's get back to this. So there's a small percent, well under 10. We know that only 10% of those people, at a conservative estimate, are causing problems.
Right.
That doesn't seem like too much of a problem, or am I missing something? Hey, let's keep walking over here. That doesn't seem like too much of a problem.
But the question is, why should a society put up with this? I mean, imagine, I always say this, if you want to know how bad it is, always look at it. Let's say if the shoe was on the other foot and look at another country. And would you blame, let's say, if, Saudi Arabia decided to allow Americans in, right?
Yeah.
And 6% of Americans were there, and all of a sudden Americans are running havoc and creating problems and raping and burning and looting and whatever, chopping, cutting people's throats in the street.
I'm trying to answer your question honestly.
But then let's say...
If 6%, if you let in 6% of Americans, and 10% of those people were causing, or Vietnamese might be better.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And then the Saudis said, you know what, we think we don't want these people here anymore. Who in their right mind, including Americans, would say, oh, that's not fair? Everyone would say, of course. Why would you want to bring in someone who, you're the good guy, I'm the host, I'm bringing you in. You should, if anything, reciprocate and be nice and, grateful, not trying to kill us, right? No other country would do this.
Yeah, I guess the difference
and no one would feel guilty about it.
I guess the difference is that they're not, here, let's go sit over here. I guess the difference is that they're not dark.
Well, okay, and that shouldn't be a factor. We shouldn't be, if you think that way, then you are a racist. See, I don't think that way. I don't care what their color is. If you behave a certain way, then you need to go. But if we start saying, oh, color is a factor, then you think, and I'm not saying you, but then we're thinking along racial terms now. And we shouldn't do that. Everyone should be held accountable like an adult. What you think?
Well, I don't think it's possible for many people to not think racially. I think that their consciousness and their cognitions have been
No, it's okay
damaged.
to think racially. It's okay to, I've always hated when someone says, I'm colorblind. Well, I'm not. When is being colorblind a good thing? Is it ever better to see black and white and not see full color? So it's okay to acknowledge different races. But what I'm saying is, your point is, I was giving you the Saudi Arabia thing,
yeah.
and the point is, if it's Americans or whoever doing something and the Saudis kick him out, no one would complain because they're white. But so what the idea is that if you're not white, you should have to get a free pass to be a criminal? I mean, everyone should be held to the same standard. That's not racist, I don't think. But you're right that that is the sort of subconscious understanding that sort of, permeates the masses intentionally to make them sitting ducks and to make them. In other words, all this stuff that gets thrown on Western nations and how they have to accept it, like you have to suppress your culture, your heritage, your religion. What other country does that to host some other people? Who does that? Nobody. Why is it always the West that has to do it? And I've mentioned this before. And who are the West? Oh, it's the smallest demographic in the world. White people are, I don't know, I see different numbers, but anywhere from like 6 to 8, 9% of the world. And they're the ones that have to give their land up. They have to accommodate everyone. They have to suppress their religion, their identity. They have to shut their mouth or they go to jail. Like, how is this fair?
I'm going to push back on you. But if they're too stupid to see what's happening, maybe they deserve it.
Yeah, we've had this, and I agree, they do deserve it, but I think a lot of them are seeing through it. And I think the ultimate lesson now that I think any people, I hope they are understanding, and let's go back to the UK, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
A lot of people, I once wrote an article because they were saying Muslims are invading the UK. And I wrote saying, no, they're not. They're not invading the UK. They're being welcomed in, and there's a big difference. Okay, historically, Muslims did try to invade Europe, and the Europeans fought back.
Largely repelled.
They were repelled, largely, and if they weren't, then the Europeans were slaughtered and enslaved, and sometimes for centuries that would happen. But at least they fought back. Now, you can't say they're invading because they are being welcomed in and given everything, hotels and food, etc. So what does that tell you? The problem to me is not the Muslims, it's your leaders, the people who are in position, right? So, and that's why people need to get over it. I always use this analogy, if there's a den full of zebras and I introduce a lion and the lion starts killing zebras, who's at fault, the lion or me for letting him in? Obviously it's me. The lion's a lion. He's doing what he's doing. The Muslim's a Muslim. He despises the infidel and he means no well for him. Whatever, right? Attacks him. So who's at fault? It's their leaders. Yeah,
it's interesting. Every interaction I've had with Muslims has been positive.
Muslims, see, and this is the problem. This is actually a good topic now. The Muslims, because they're kind of like a little more primordial. Western man's problem is he's so corrupt and emasculated and effeminized and just, has lost his mooring with being a man. Whereas Islam, the only decent thing about it is it's very, try getting away with this gender nonsense in a Muslim country, give me a break. Or this trans stuff. No way. And I respect that they don't tolerate that sort of thing. So yeah, and that's kind of the appeal of the Muslim is that, on the one hand, he doesn't put up, and it's also a reflection of the Western man. Just as the Western man puts up with the Muslims' nonsense, so the Western man puts up with all kinds of stupidity in the name of tolerance, et cetera, which is why he's getting trampled upon so easily.
There is a kind of glorification of the weakness of men in Western society.
Yeah, but I think that's intentional because they've taught men that if you want to be attractive, you have to be weak. But that's so we can walk all over you and control you. Who are the arbiters of any society? It's the men. If you want to control a society, if I'm this evil, evil Dr. Genius, whatever, Dr. Evil, and I want to control a society, the number one thing I'd want to do is to emasculate the men and to convince the men that, hey, maybe acting like a woman is kind of cool. All right, because that right there is the easiest way to control and try to empower the women and just to create chaos so that nothing even makes sense and everyone's demoralized and women and men don't get along and families fall apart. Okay, so that's why I think even with this whole like trans and sex gender confusion, it's all by design, I believe. A lot of this is by design.
See,
it has to be.
I'm not buying that.
Because it's gone I used to think all this is organic, okay? It's kind of like a natural development.
But that assumes
philosophy gone wrong.
There's somebody behind it.
Yeah, there's
a cabal of Illuminati or somebody pulling strings, everyone's a marionette. Like that, I'm just not.
You don't believe in conspiracy theories? See, the problem, a lot of people tell me I don't believe in conspiracy theories, and I'm not talking about any specific conspiracy theory, but when you say I don't believe in a conspiracy theory, and that's a popular thing to say if you want to sound rational, what you're also saying by default is that I believe everything is transparent and being shown to me. Because and who can believe that? You'd have to be a fool to believe that. But if everything isn't transparent and there's two or more people working together behind the scenes, which obviously makes much sense, whether they're political figures or not, that's a conspiracy.
Yeah, so I guess if you mean by conspiracy, I'm fairly confident that the genesis of this madness is from the university.
Well, that's a powerful tool.
Groups of deranged people get together and they fabricate bodies of literature. The Idea Laundry have written about that.
And Hollywood,
But Hollywood is downstream of academia.
No, I know.
Because the people get out of academia and go into Hollywood.
Yeah, or you can see them as, they're kind of the two arms of the same kind of body. One is geared towards stupefying academics and intellectuals who want to be smart. And one is for the masses, Hollywood. But they both have the same message, right? And I'll give you another example on this topic that we're talking about and to show you so if you look at history and you look today, every culture, every civilization, they venerate their forefathers and their ancestors, right? I mean, this is it's across the board, and no one would argue or complain and say, you're bad for doing that, even if their ancestors are bad. It's a natural instinct. It makes sense. It's part of our continuity, our bloodline, our heritage, etc. And, and I see this a lot with the Muslim world, and the kind of Muslims that they venerate are pretty nasty people. I mean, we're talking about mass slavers, like someone like Mehmet or Muhammad II, the Ottoman Sultan, who, let's just take my word for it. I don't want to waste time on it, but I write about him a lot. The stuff he did is pretty despicable and abominable, but he's got statues everywhere in Turkey. Okay, now you come to the West, where they actually have really good ancestors they should celebrate, and they're hated. And there's so much disdain. And, George Washington's statue, Abraham Lincoln, whatever, have to go down. Churchill, okay.
Lincoln, in Portland, they ripped down the statue of Lincoln. They said he's a Nazi.
Yeah.
There's a swastika with a line through it there.
But here's the thing, let's forget what they really are or what they weren't. My point is, people don't do that to their ancestors, even when they know they're bad, because it's part of it's our team, and we got our guy. He's our guy, okay?
But we do that to our ancestors. We love doing that to our ancestors.
And the question is why? But there's an important reason. When you tear down your ancestors and your history, okay, you've renounced your heritage. You've said no to it.
But they want to renounce. They think that the system itself is the cause that needs to be dismantled and disrupted.
Right, but a lot of this...
And that's being taught in the university.
Exactly, and that's the fake history that I'm always combating, because fake history makes people hate their ancestors, and it was intentional. To make they lie about the past.
And the way that they try to make it so that everything you're writing about and speaking about doesn't have to be taken seriously is they call you far right.
Right, yeah. Or everything, let's say slavery, You mentioned slavery on campus. Oh, everyone knows about slavery. They know about the transatlantic slavery. That's it. And the idea is only white people ever engaged in slavery.
Did Muslims tell us a little bit about Muslim slavery?
Yeah, much more than whites ever did. And they enslaved tons of whites. In the 16th century alone, there was 1.2 million whites in Barbary, North Africa, who were kidnapped by Muslims. And they were all taken from Europe. As far as Iceland, they would go. And Denmark.
Many on the left would argue that's a good thing.
So it's bad when whites enslave blacks, but when blacks enslave whites, that's a good thing. Okay.
It's a kind of egalitarianism of slavery. Like it's not so that whites took a lot of. I'm not saying I believe.
No,
this.
I know you said a lot of people say that.
So it's not that. So whites took a lot of blacks, and it's only fair that other non-white people should take white people as slaves.
Oh, I see. If it's a tit for tat.
Yeah, that equals everything else. So
right, but what I'm saying is they did it first. The Muslims and the Africans were actually enslaving whites before the transatlantic slave trade.
So then they would have to make the argument that
it was still good, obviously, because it was multiculturalism, but.
So when you present people with this argument that there were actually Muslim slave traders, and a lot of them, who took a significant number of white people, what is the response? Is it they deserved it? Is it denialism? No, that's not true. What is the response?
In my experience, the response, and I'm the one who's really been doing this, uncovering lots in the historical field. The best response for them is nothing. Just act like they never heard it, and never, they won't debate me. They won't read. That's why if you can get that guy or anyone, I'm more than happy to.
So you're willing to debate whatever that dude's name is? Yeah. I don't remember his name. So you're willing to come on and debate the guy?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I can that's what they tell you what's going to happen.
What's going to happen?
They're going to say I didn't reach out to him.
Oh,
well, you will. Say, well, yeah, but they're going to say, he sent us emails, but the emails were never responded to. I can already tell you.
I know that's happened to me before with other people. I know.
You didn't really send them. You didn't really mean
because how do you win? Here's the thing: when we come to facts and history, and if you're smart, if I was in that guy's position going against me, and I see what I'm saying,
would you say?
What am I going to say? I mean, the facts, the record is the record. So that's why their strongest apologetic or defense damage control is denial and ignoring it, and don't even look at it, don't talk to him, suppress him. When I was invited to give a talk at the War College, the U.S. Army War College, about history, CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and all these leftist groups flipped out and called me a racist and a white supremacist. But they couldn't say that it was about my book, Sword and Scimitar.
White supremacist.
Yeah, me. But they couldn't find anything wrong in my book. They didn't say, on page so-and-so he lied.
It's funny how the semantic range of that term has...
Yeah, an Egyptian guy has become a white supremacist.
Continuously from, Scandinavians or Germans.
Yeah, because these words are just made to shut you down. That's it. Yeah. And that's why another thing I would say, it's sad because, things like racism do exist, right?
Yeah,
but these words are being so overplayed and being weaponized, and it's the only way around it is I think people need to just not care. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, people should take an attitude where, if you want to call me racist, call me a racist.
Okay,
you want to call me anything, call me anything.
So here's
but I'm above and beyond.
Here's a problem with that. So we're going to do an event tomorrow at the Comedy Cellar. You don't disclose your whereabouts because some lunatic could saw your head off, and yet we've posted your name and face to I don't even know how many people at this point.
All right.
And so now we have to be concerned about getting security so that no one murders you or blows himself up in the middle of the Comedy Cellar.
Right. And what does that tell us about the current situation? Now, when you go back to the small minority and say, in America, I think Muslims are 1%, and we have situations like that. So,
I think that was the case with the Book of Mormon. When what did the Mormons do? They took out an ad, but nobody is worrying about Mormons killing anybody else.
Right.
But again, I guess the retort, I can hear the retort now, is that this is such a small number of people who are radical, and there's a small number of any religion who's radical.
Okay, this is like someone telling me, hey, I'm going to give you a jar full of candy. There's 100 little pieces of candy, and only 2 are poison. Only 3 are going to kill you. What's the big deal? Just let's all eat from it. What if I say, I don't want to take the chance. I'd rather not have all those sweets, but also not die.
Yeah, but in the case of the UK, and then I'm going to ask you a question about Palestinians.
What do they get? What does the UK get in return for what they take in? What?
Well, I mean, you're asking the
exotic cuisine.
You're asking the wrong
know.
guy. I mean,
I'm trying to think there should be a reciprocal. Okay, I understand what migrants are getting.
I don't know, replacing the population, some kind of economic advantage. Although that's not true when you look at the data for incarceration rates and for who contributes to the treasury. But So is it true that if you looked at a population like Palestinians, same culture, same history, same language, same tradition, same everything, but and again, this is outside my area, but there are not many, if any, Christian suicide bombers, but there are Muslim suicide bombers, so that you can point to the one, like when you quote unquote science something, you want to keep all of the variables the same and change only one of the variables.
Exactly. And what is it? It's Islam. But you can't say that. I understand that people don't want to say that. But just like you pointed out, there's a lot of, where's the Palestinian Christian suicide bomber? Well, because it's just not part of their thing. It's part of Islam.
The way that people respond to that is they don't talk to you and call you far right, because they can't respond to it with reason, evidence, and argument, or they would be coming on the show and talking. And the reason that we would want them to come on the show is like, you don't really want them. Actually, I do. You against one of these guys would get a crazy number of views. So actually, it is in my own interest.
Bring it on. I'd love it. Anybody.
Yeah, they won't come. They won't come.
I know.
But okay, so are you optimistic about the future of Western Europe?
I think Western Europe it's going to get worse and worse until it can possibly get better. It's going to get primitive, I think, because what the Europeans need to understand is, okay, and I know your point about conspiracy and cabal and all that, but what they have to understand is the real enemy is the people ruling them, their own leaders, okay? And why they're doing all that, I don't know. I can't get into that. But that's the source of why this is happening. So it seems like they need to get rid of them. I think most of the people...
Like vote reform in England or something?
I mean,
whatever.
We say vote, and it's kind of like that's what they've been doing. And either the voting is rigged, or the people, once they vote them in, they all of a sudden all do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like...
Well, if they all did the same thing, there'd have to be some reason for it.
Something behind it, right. And here's another
Especially if they
thought.
said they wouldn't do the same thing. Yeah, what's your other thought?
Here's the other thought is like, we're all conditioned, especially in the West, war is bad, never engage in war, and we all have freedom of speech, we have freedom of expression.
Bad, yeah.
War is horrible, I get it. But, when is war justified? And in other words, let's
just
say...
war theory. There are definitely just, like in the case, let's someone arguing the case of genocide, but go ahead.
Let's say this UK situation, right? Let's say no matter what, the government is going to keep bringing in more and more migrants and Muslims, and is going to clamp down on suppressing the native Europeans, as putting them in jail, for speaking their mind. All of that, okay? And no matter what they do, it just gets worse and worse. Year goes by, and there's more attacks, more violence on little kids. Okay, at what point does war actually become plausible and fair and logical?
Probably never.
But what if that's their only option?
Yeah, but they did it to themselves.
Okay.
Like if they didn't do it to the... Like
so it's okay that they let themselves die, but they can't fight back now?
Well, I mean, if you told me that they're invading, then you would be
I'm not saying war against Muslims. I'm saying war against their leaders. That's what I mean. That's the
Oh,
source.
like an uprising against their leaders.
Yeah, not the Muslims. The Muslims, that's a byproduct. That's a side effect. Is the Islam thing. It's not inherent. Islam is weak. Look at countries like Hungary and Poland. They don't have this problem, right?
They don't have the problem at all.
They just don't let it in.
Yeah,
okay, we're done. No problem. We put up a little fence and we're done. So the issue is just their leaders. And
so at what point does a kind of mutiny or civil war against your leader, is it morally justified?
Yeah.
Because they're not listening to the interests of the people? I would say that's a good question.
Isn't that the American Revolution?
Well, my gut tells me never, since you vote if the elections were fair.
Right. But what if they're fair, and whoever wants, you see this all the time, a leader or a politician gets elected, and he said all the perfect things. But once he gets in power, and people are saying Trump is doing this. I've heard arguments against Trump. He becomes like the rest. And he starts, in other words, if it's just a corrupt system, and there's no beating it no matter what, okay? At what point do the people, if you're constantly year after year, decade after decade, watching yourself being degraded and weakened and primed for a takeover by invaders, when do you finally, grow the cojones and say, I'm done with this, and I know my leaders are for whatever reason, they're not helping me. Now I have to be a man and do something about it.
I don't know. I'm
And I know that's not an easy question. It's,
I don't know.
Nor am I inciting anything. I'm just trying, it's a philosophical observation.
No, I'm thinking of Socrates in the Apology.
Right.
When he says, I live by the laws, the rules of the state, I'm not going to escape.
Right.
my gut is to say it's not ever justified, but I guess if it were true cultural suicide and then if you didn't do anything, the whole culture would vanish, then it gets back to what I said before, that would show an inherent flaw of the system and maybe it should vanish.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, the current system in these European countries obviously doesn't have the people's interest at heart. I saw a video of, I think it was in Munich, it was in Germany, it was some Congress or parliamentarian woman with short hair, I forget her name, but she gets up and she's like, yeah, I want to tell all you right-wingers that in 10 years, the Germans are going to be a minority in this city, and that's a good thing. Yeah. What kind of mentality is that? That is, I mean, this is a sad part. They've conditioned people to act and think this is good.
Okay, so
and it's suicidal.
All right, let's talk about that. So what is her, God, it just kills me that these people will not talk, because I'd love to know the reason behind that.
You want to interview them and they won't?
No, they're not going to come. But what is the reason that she thinks that it's a good thing that there are going to be no Germans in Germany?
Well, I would think she's a perfect product of the indoctrination that Western Europe, especially Germany, has gone through, which is, it's just about self-loathing. It's all about me and my heritage, us evil white racists.
Oikophobia, the hatred, West self-hatred.
And we need to do everything possible to help the brown people.
But even if that's the case, why would you want no more Germans living in Germany, or no more?
Because it's a celebration of multiculturalism.
Vietnamese living in Vietnam.
Well, that's the thing. I told you, if you think about it in any other context, it sounds crazy. Who would say, imagine some Cuban saying, we don't want any Cubans living in Cuba. Well, it doesn't make sense. But they've gotten Western people to think it's my duty as a good, noble Western person who acknowledges the crimes of my ancestors to become a doormat and let everyone in, and I have to shut my mouth and suppress myself.
Because there's something inherently evil in the nature of whiteness.
Yeah, and they got them believing that.
They got to believe that, and then if we can
which
just
is why there's a war on history.
People,
right.
There's a war.
Because
well,
if they know real history,
yeah, there has to be a war in history.
That's why there's a war on history, teaching them the fake history. Okay, because that's if whites are evil, well, that means we have to look at the history, and then the history is all lies and it's all distorted. And you don't know that actually the whites were always oftentimes the victims and the ones who were being killed and enslaved, and they were the ones fighting back in the name of, and even, in one of my books, I do a close look at what happened to...
Which book?
The new one, actually, Two Swords of Christ, which deals with the Templars and the Hospitallers.
Are you a Christian?
I am,
okay.
Orthodox.
Okay.
Which means if you ask other Christians, they'll say I'm not a Christian, but anyway. In that book...
Well, if a guy can identify as a woman, you can certainly identify as a Christian.
Yeah, I hope so. But in that book, I talk about slavery a little bit, and you see, the Christians, especially the Knights, would enslave Muslims as a tit for tat because of what was happening. But it was like 3% of the amount that Muslims enslaved of Christians. But if you look at how they were treated, so the Muslims in Malta, for example, the Knights of Malta, they could have a mosque. They had their prayer leader, etc. In North Africa, when you talk about the white slaves under Islam, first of all, they were all like raped by, and sodomized. And if they say or do anything, the tortures that they would go through, cutting their nose and eyes out and throwing them to hang on a hook.
This is all historically documented.
Oh yeah, all historically documented. So, even in that sense, you see the difference in how the different groups treated each other. My point is, history has been so weaponized, I call it fake history, because the only way to get white people to believe all the evil stuff about their ancestors is to lie about history.
You have to let them know that only white people did bad things.
Right. That's the idea.
The white people did bad things to everybody else, and
now
nobody ever did anything bad.
And now you have to make up for it.
It's a kind of experiential reparations?
I guess, yeah. Even if it was true, why should any white person today do anything, or even a black person? Because none of them suffered. The white person today is not the enslaver, and the black person today has never been enslaved. So even if it was true, I don't even get it. It doesn't make sense, because it implies that we have to be, we're responsible for the crimes of our ancestors. What kind of society is that? But the point is, it's not even true in the sense that it's so pulled out of context, and you don't get the full picture. And I've seen this woman, Bridget Cooper, and she's a professor at a...
Oh, yeah. No, of her.
Rutgers. And she goes out, and she's a professor, and she says stuff like white people are inherently evil.
Yeah.
They're committed to being evil. And she is a perfect product of what I'm talking about.
So I guess my concern is every time I have these kinds of conversations, I had one with Ralph Schulhammer, I'm always concerned that people are going to watch this and be like, well, these are two white dudes. They're like white. Okay. Well, I'm actually barely white if I'm white. I don't know. Is Armenians white? I don't even know.
Well,
anymore.
I know.
Yeah. But it's. I don't really know. It's just such a potent mind virus
Exactly.
that
they've gotten people. That's how they
deny
think.
history.
Yeah.
You deny, and they cement the narrative by not having people come on
Right.
from the other side to have
Right.
the conversation about it. So there's really nothing you can do about
Yeah.
it. There's just
They'll
like,
censor you.
It's like a battle of
Right.
competing narratives, and there's no middle. There's just like a cudgel, which is, in a way, it's a very postmodern position. It all comes down to power. It's all about who wields the power and effectively wields the power. So,
And they'll do whatever to not be threatened, whether it's to suppress you, whether it's to call you a racist, or whether it's just ignore you and pretend you don't exist. I mean, look at all these guys who used to be on YouTube, now they're like kicked out on Rumble.
oh yeah,
Because they said the wrong thing, right?
yeah. I noticed on Twitter you follow Yasmin Mohammed.
Yeah, that's only because I'm
She's
actually
great.
now starting to follow people. Yeah,
Yeah,
and she interviewed me recently.
Yasmin is fantastic.
Yeah.
Her book Unveiled was
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. And I've done a few things with her. We did Spectrum Street epistemology with her. We did a few things, and one of the things she said was about having a Muslim as a close friend, Orthodox. I can't remember the word, Orthodox or strict Muslim, and she said that they want to kill her.
Kill her.
Yeah, because
She's
the
an
punishment.
apostate. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could talk about that, because every time I mention that, people say it's not true. They don't really want to kill apostates. It's not really illegal in 11 countries. They don't. It's like, so I was wondering.
All right. So, well,
Okay.
there's a lot to unpack there. So,
Okay,
according
please.
to Islamic law, Sharia, it is it's forbidden, it's illegal, and there is a punishment for it. There's
Is that in the Quran?
It's derived from the Quran, but it's
The Hadith?
mostly the Hadith. There's
Okay.
a canonical Hadith where Muhammad says, "He who leaves his religion, kill him." Okay. So, based on that, you have four primary Orthodox small O schools of jurisprudence in Islam, Sunni Islam, and each of them will treat it as a horrible thing. Some will say kill. Some will say if it's a woman, you just beat her up and put her in a room for a year, starve her. So it's horrific treatment up to death. Not necessarily it has to be death, but it wavers. And then countries, what they do is a lot of these Muslim countries, because they know how bad it is to codify this in their actual laws, they don't, but they still act on it. You know what I mean? So it's like if you become an apostate in a Muslim country, there's no law necessarily that will say you're to be killed, but they'll leave you to the angry mob, and they'll look the other way while the angry mob tears you to pieces, or your family often. So long and short of it is, I would not want to be a Muslim who openly apostatizes living in an Islamic country. I would not feel safe.
So Brussels is doing something like the Quran Project for like, what is it, 10 million euros or something?
Yeah, this actually is perfect. It really applies to what we've been talking about. It just shows it's, again, okay, so Brussels, the EU, are sponsoring a project. It's actually been going on for years. It's called the Quran.
Okay.
And they're spending about 10 million euros, which is a lot. And it's dedicated to showing you how Islam has been misunderstood and has always belonged in the continent of Europe.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so this is what I mean by fake history.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
a perfect example of, hey, let's pacify these crazy right-wing, St. George-loving Europeans.
St. George.
Yeah, by showing them that, you know what, you guys are idiots. Muslims have always been here. And all that, of course, is complete hogwash, complete lies. Yeah, they have been in Europe, but usually to kill and rape and murder historically as conquerors, of course. So and we can get into that, because I recently actually wrote about it. But
In what book?
I actually wrote an article about it, and I did a video about it on YouTube, because this is recent development. But when I looked at some of the people that they're paying all this money to, who are involved, academics, and other people. Some of them are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay,
Tell people a little bit about what is the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay, the Muslim Brotherhood is seen as often the oldest Islamic organization, and it was born in Egypt, I believe, I want to say 1929, by Hassan al-Banna, an Egyptian guy. And it's kind of like the parent organization. A lot of terrorists actually started off in the Muslim Brotherhood. such as Ayman Zawahiri, who became the Al-Qaeda leader after Osama was killed. And they're very surreptitious. They try to act like they're peaceful, but there's a lot of evidence against, that they somehow are not necessarily peaceful. They engage in terrorism, but they put on this front. So the organization that came up against me and was screaming because I was going to the War College, CARE, is a byproduct. It's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. There was actually a leaked a document that was captured by the FBI, which names CARE as an affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood, for example. But they're basically, if you want to talk about a cabal, they're a cabal, and they're multinational, they're all over the place, and they exist to do exactly that, rehabilitate Islam's image on the one hand, and attack people like me from...
And then you get the things like the project that Brussels is putting out.
Right. And that's exactly. So they work hand in hand. On the one hand, you have the Muslim side, which makes sense, okay, because Islam has always been the historic enemy.
Can I throw out a hypothesis?
Sure.
And you tell me if it's full of beans or not?
Okay.
Okay. Do you think one of the reasons that this is happening is that people realize that there's a critical mass now, and they don't want to risk inflaming people for a kind of uprising? Civil war might be way too strong, but
right.
They want to. It really is about safety when you raise the St. George flag.
Yeah, I would say
it really is. Yeah,
I would say that might be somewhat legit, and it's a plausible kind of approach. But if you're doing that, then okay, then I hope that also means you admit that the fault that you played in making it get to this point, and now you're going to do something hopefully quietly behind the scenes to fix it, which would include actually
appeasement,
getting rid of the migrants. But that's not what's happening. It seems like it's the opposite. In other words, I get it if they're like, okay, hey, we don't want civil war, so let's do what we got to do. But now let's fix what we did. Well, let's fix what's causing the anger. But they're not doing that. They're doubling down. They're bringing in more migrants, and they're forcing the people to shut up and take it.
Okay, what would a far-right position on immigration be?
Well, that's the funny thing. See, when people say a far-right position, to me, the most far-right radical position is what your average sane non-Western person would do in their own country, okay? Which would be, I don't want outsiders here because the way they act, they're
like
not assimilating.
Japanese.
Yeah, you're not assimilating. This is my country. You have your country, and that's the end of it. But that's far-right.
But yet they would not call those people far-right.
Exactly. Because
so
it's a weaponized word for whites and Europeans.
So only in a Western context is
when
wanting to limit immigration considered far right.
When a Western man acts like a normal man, he's far right. That's the whole point. Like when a Western person does what, when Western people do what non-Western people do all the time, and which is taken for granted, and which is considered common sense and self-preservation and self-respect. When they do that, they get tarred as evil, racist, and right-wing lunatics, right? Because like you said, they'll never use those terms for, like you said, the Japanese, right? Okay, it's their country. They want it that way.
Yeah,
Who's going to complain?
I just read the stats on how many refugees the Japanese take in. I can't remember what it was. It's like
tiny.
Something like below 100, I think 79. But okay, yeah. So anyway, that's interesting. So,
why is that though? Why is it always just the white countries that have to? That if they think the way other people think, they become horrible right-wing.
Oikophobia, just hatred, the West self-hatred.
Racist. Yeah, exactly. And is that organic, or is it something else? Because if it's organic, why doesn't it happen in other places?
Okay, so we talked about the concept of a far right position. What's a far left position on immigration?
Well, a far left position, I imagine,
borders?
would be I've drank all the Kool-Aid they've given me, and I believe my society's evil, and it's my duty as a good person to make it up to all the brown people who are not my people, and I have to do anything that makes them happy. I have to give them everything off my shirt, and I have to make my hair blue and green too, because that's part of my stupidity. And that's the far left position, right?
So bringing it back to the United States has nowhere near the kinds of problems with well, I don't want to say immigration because people are freaking out about. I actually love
with Islam.
I
you
actually love Mexican immigration. I think
it's better than Muslim.
I know that that probably get 5,000 people like, oh, you.
No, but you see, there's something in it.
Left-winger, you're like, you know.
But there's something in what you said where, you know, I prefer it too, because whatever, you know, okay, all illegal immigration is illegal immigration, but at least, you know, with Mexican immigration, it's not going to have that anti-infidel violence, and
Well,
you know,
yeah,
it's not going to have that.
I just, you know, when Trump, the first term, was screaming about Mexicans being murderers and rapists, that's just not borne out by the data. But
Right.
bracket that for a second. Okay, so we don't have the same kinds of problems in the West with Muslim immigration that we do in the United States. Excuse me. And so
Europe,
talk me through that, because my speculation was that we take in a different kind of immigrant.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you're talking about it, the thing with Europe is, due to its proximity to the Islamic world, almost all of the migrants that come are Muslim. They're from the Muslim world, the vast majority. Because what's south of Europe? Islam. What's southeast of Europe? You know, after Russia, Islam. Okay, Central Asian countries. So it's so surrounded that whenever it gets migrants, they tend to be Muslim. In the U.S., it's different, as you noted.
Yeah.
And it brings its own issues. But again, you know, even the migrant issue in America, let's put the Islam thing aside, it still makes sense. You know, you have people in America who are starting to feel like we're becoming the minority. We're fleeing California. We're fleeing the big cities. Why should it be like that? What other country does that to itself, where, you know, it allows its big cities all to become crime-ridden and ghettoized? And
yeah, I just read today that my city where I lived for such a long time, Portland, is the number 2 most dangerous city in the country.
And it's also one of the most liberal.
Yeah,
Go figure.
And so give me a reality check. I was happy about that.
Why?
Because there has to be a connection between, in a democracy, or only in a democracy, between the people you vote for and the policies they enact. And you have to step up and take responsibility for what it is that you've done. Because if you don't have some kind of accountability through democratic action and processes, then what are you doing? So the way to make people responsible, it's like Charles Murray's What It Means to Be a Libertarian. It's kind of the same principle of that book. It's like the way to make people responsible. God, I'm smelling pot constantly. There's like almost nobody around here.
Go ahead, continue the Portland thing.
Yeah, but the way to make people responsible is there has to be some kind of accountability. Some people need to know that there's a direct connection between the people they vote in, the policies they enact,
You're
and
saying
the lives they lead.
You're happy because when Portland suffers, the people get to see that this is your doing.
Well,
because
yeah.
of who you voted for.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
But the problem is that they will never do that. The problem is
They'll double down and they'll think we need more leftism. Yeah.
No, they will blame the far right. There's some like cabal of like Proud Boys or like some secret, thing, so
they can't take responsibility.
It's fascinating to me why policies at all, and maybe we'll differ on this, but why is there like a right-wing or a left-wing policy as opposed to an evidence policy? So for example, like when data is not right or left, like global climate data is not right, there's just data. Right. What you do with the data in terms of your public policy, that is inherently political.
That's, I think, one of the biggest problems nowadays is we are trapped in this left-right spectrum.
I completely agree.
And it's so artificial. There's parts of it where,
agree.
Like, for example, when someone comes and starts saying, hey, I'm a man, but you have to call me a woman or you go to jail, I'm sorry, this is no longer left. This is stupidity. This is insanity. But when we call it left, we give it dignity and we give it the weight of ideology, and then we have to contend with it as if it's just another part of the spectrum. It doesn't belong there at all. And I think people need to start and I hate the word the left for this very reason, because it allows stupidity and evil to hide, essentially. When you say a man that wants to, dress up as a woman and go teach or read a book to little kids, that's not left, man. That's predatory. That's evil. That's sick. But you see the importance of the words. If I would have called it that, a lot of people would be, would kind of get it. But when you call it the left, it hides. It blends in. Oh, it's just a different political view. And it's kind of like we need to get. We need to move.
Political views are equal.
Yeah.
Oh, cool! Look at the turtles.
Yeah.
Dude, get the turtles. Get the turtles.
Lucky guys.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't like, and I agree with you, you don't like the right and the left
No.
characters.
It's an artificial dichotomy. It just, look, I believe there is a political spectrum, but you know what? It used to be, like when people talk about, I'm a fiscal conservative.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I get that. But when you talk about things like morality or questions about truth,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, and then you say, oh, that's left wing or that's right wing. That's that. I think that just is an oversimplification, but it also, like I said, it hides crazy, perverse thinking and gives it respectability.
Okay, so let me ask you
And
a question.
I would argue a lot of leftists would even agree with me and say, yeah, we hate the fact, in fact, they have said this to me, we hate the fact that we get conflated with these loonies, you know, the trans people, let's say,
Yeah.
and that they've appropriated our movement or whatever.
Yeah, they've bartered economic considerations
Right.
for identity.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So we have a large number of people, and maybe you'll disagree with that, but we have a lot of people, let me say that, who don't think there's any problem with large numbers of Islamic immigration in Western Europe. Mm-hmm. And then we have other people who think it's a problem. Is there what is the solution, or you think it's a problem, Islamic immigration in Western Europe? What is, or in the United, do you think it's a problem in the United States as well?
The number-wise is not nowhere near as bad as in Europe. I mean, depending on what you look at, I hear it's sometimes like only 1% in America, and a majority of those, I heard at one point, half of them are African Americans who convert in jail. Which on the one hand also kind of means I don't know how serious they are about their Islam. It's just some kind of like identity cool thing they do. But yeah, that's, wherever you have Islam, okay, if it can grow and breathe and become Islam, true Islam, it's going to be a problem. It's just in America is nowhere near as bad as Europe, but it's on that trajectory, obviously.
So what is the solution in Western Europe? Would it be a moratorium on all immigration?
I would say, yeah. I mean, you've had enough, right? Put an end to it right now. And then, I mean, and the ones who are there illegally, they should probably be sent right back, right?
What if somebody commits a crime?
And that person too. The point is, coming to another country, you have to be, look, my parents were immigrants to the United States.
From Egypt?
Yeah, from Egypt.
Yeah.
They came legally. I remember I wasn't even born, but you know, my parents had to wait years to get their, you know, whatever, to come to the US.
Yeah.
And when they came in, you know, they're grateful. It's like, we want to fit in. We want to do the right thing. We want to be a contribution.
My grandparents were immigrants.
Right. Yeah. And they, you know, they were humble about it and they want to contribute.
So what's the solution now? Tell me the solution.
Well, the solution is, I mean, there's different ways to look at it. The philosophical solution, which I like to start with because in the basic, simple way, the commonsensical way, is just enough with let's say I'm a European American or European. It's my job to hate and renounce everything about my past, and my job to, you know, do everything possible for everyone who's not white, including step over myself and, you know, destroy my culture and my nationality, my heritage. Okay, that's the first step. That's the simple step.
And the way to help people think about that is they wouldn't want, for example, the Japanese to do that, or they wouldn't want the Nigerians to repudiate.
Right, nobody does
culture.
that. Nobody does that. And the first step on that road, believe it or not, and this is why this is my field, is history. Because everyone assumes they know, the people who I'm talking about who think, you know, their ancestors were monsters, they think they know history, but they've been fed a lie. They've been fed a fake history, like this, you know, EU thing we're talking about.
Yes.
And that history has been, from top to bottom, has all been about demonizing their ancestors. So no wonder they hate them, because if you believe that stuff, they're monsters. Okay.
And the consequences are things like, well, we need to rip down statues.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And just and in short, be the opposite of how they were. So they used to fight Muslims from coming into Europe. So we are going to take them in, show you how great and tolerant we are. Okay. But if you understand the real history, that these guys were actually fighting to maintain their lives and their families and freedom. They weren't aggressors. It was the Muslims who were the aggressors, who were coming into Europe, who took, people forget, think about it, all these countries from, you know, all of North Africa, from Morocco to Egypt and all the Middle East.
Yeah.
That was, which is now the heart of the Muslim world.
Yeah.
That was all Christian. And it was conquered violently in the 7th century. And Spain was conquered. And they went all the way up to Tours in the middle of France. And then later the Ottomans conquered the Balkans. And the Tatars, who were Muslims, conquered Russia. And it was it was a constant, it was like the perennial war. Every European knew it. The enemy is the Muslim, and the Muslim hated the European. He's our enemy. And then all of a sudden that real history, over 1,000 years, has been jettisoned. And now all of a sudden, Europeans are the bad guys, and the Muslims are the innocent victims.
Okay, what would you say to those Muslims who say, listen, yeah, there's a lot of crazy shit in our history, but we're just here, you know, we speak the language, we just want to make some money, we just want to be treated fairly, we're not sawing anybody's head off, we're not blowing shit up. What would you say to them?
I would say I get it, I understand it, and I believe you. As I already indicated earlier, I said let's say 10% are the bad guys. But here's the thing, like, why should the burden of proof? Okay, let's say I get it, and they don't want to be stereotyped, right?
Yeah.
But the burden of the proof why is it put on the European? In other words, why should the European say, okay, I'm going to give you all benefit of the doubt, because that's the only way to do it, and then I get killed?
Well, because they're already in the country.
Oh, so
it is unfair to the 90% of Muslims. Again, I'm just going with that figure. We can have that conversation, but it is unfair to the 90% of Muslims that 10% of their fellow Muslims are fucking lunatics who are literally hell-bent on destroying the nature of society, killing the Jews, etc.
Right.
But it is still unfair to 90%.
I get it, but there's another consideration to keep in mind is, you know, as long as you're a Muslim, and I've seen this happen a lot of times, they turn from just being normal to being a terrorist because the doctrine is there in their head. And sure, they ignore it for most of their lives, but just a couple of set of circumstances go wrong and they get bitter, and all of a sudden, boom, it's terrorist mode. And I've seen this with a lot of the terrorist attacks in Europe. You find that, oh, he was always secular. Oh, he never read the Quran. And then like 2 weeks before the attack, you find out he started going to mosque, you know? So that's not to say, of course, that I'm not trying to say that all Muslims are going to do that. I'm just saying it is a problem. It is a sticky situation. I mean, here's what a European, this is what a medieval European would say.
Yeah.
He would say, okay, well, but we know your religion is hostile. We need it so you can openly apostatize and renounce it. That's actually what they did. So in Spain, here's a perfect example. We always hear about the Inquisition, right? That's another perfect example of how monstrous Europeans were. And I'm not trying to rehabilitate the Inquisition, but I'm giving you context. I'm giving you context, okay?
Okay.
So the context, here's what you're told. It comes off as just these Spaniards, especially, who decided to just attack peaceful Jews and Muslims and do this Inquisition and force them to become Christian. Yeah. And if not, they kick them out, okay? So that is all true. Now here's the problem. Here's the missing context.
Okay.
Right? Why was that? Now the assumption that they want you to believe is that because they're just crazy Christians and they're xenophobes and they just want everyone to be like them and radicals. No, the truth is, as someone who's digged into this and written about it, the Muslims especially what they would do is they would convert. Okay, first when the Spaniards reconquered most of Spain and took Granada, they told the Muslims you can keep your religion and live according to your Sharia, no problem. But for decades, they kept subverting and working with the Barbary pirates and working with the Ottomans, and they were basically a fifth column. So that's when the crown said, look, you either become a Christian or you leave. The logic was, it's not because they want you to be a Christian, but they wanted you to leave Islam. And the only alternative then, of course, is to become a Christian. There's no atheism in, you know, the 13th century or whatever the time is. So,
or there were no out atheists.
Right, yeah. So the logic is this is how you leave your religion. So that's what they were trying to do. And to show you, and so what the Muslims did is they got an actual fatwa to practice taqiyya. Taqiyya is this doctrine which allows you to lie, right? So this is Catholic Spain, so they got baptized, they went to church, they did Holy Communion, and they taught their kids that, the equivalent of Sunday school, generation after generation, this would go on. And like 100 years would pass, and that living Christian was still a Muslim at heart, trying to subvert and destroy Spain. And then that's why they finally kicked them out. They said, even if you convert, it doesn't help because you're lying. So my point in telling you all that is the level of that you have to deal with when you come to Islam, that there is going to be lies, there is going to be pretenders, there is going to be all this. It's part of the religion. Okay, so, but having said all that, I still believe there's the guy who comes from the Muslim world who doesn't mean any of this.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
means, you know, I get that, but it becomes so complicated and so sticky, and at the same time, it makes you ask yourself, well, why do I have to, you know, the burden of proof on me? Because the only way to allow that guy to get away with it is that I have to just let everyone get away with it.
Okay, so
and then someone's going to get hurt.
If you had the ear of the leaders of old Europe, you know, I love that Rumsfeldian phrase, you know, France and Belgium and the UK, what would you tell them? You have their ear.
I would tell them, I mean, look, the migrants you have now, obviously, they are what they are, and, you know, try to assimilate them as best as you can, but no more migration. Enough is enough. And no more, you know, trying to force your people and your culture and your heritage always to like cater to the Muslim. Here's another thing that they don't get. The more you cater to the Muslims and appease, the more they despise you and spit in your face. So do it stand up just from a practical point of view.
Okay.
Okay? Because they respect strength. They don't respect weakness. When you show weakness and kindness, that's not seen as kindness. It's seen as you are weak. And to a certain extent, it's true. That is weakness, to act that way. Okay? To step on your own culture in order to make room for someone else. Nobody does that. They don't do that, right? So it would be a little more, you know, reclaim your heritage, stop oppressing your people, and make sure the ones that are there assimilate as best as you can, and keep an eye on mosques, because those tend to be the breeding grounds of
I would say prisons as well, no?
prisons too, yeah.
Okay, where can people find your work, Raymond?
Go to my website, RaymondIbrahim.com, and all my
Spell it
stuff, RaymondIbrahim.com. And they can find all my stuff there, books and everything.
And just to be clear, you're willing to have a conversation if I can find somebody who disagrees with you? You're willing to
Anybody,
have that
I'm down.
Anybody.
Anytime. Well, I mean, I don't know about any time, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'll try to accommodate.
Right on. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure, thanks, man.